So last page we were looking at given a trig function, type in your calculator, graph it, see where it goes. In this one, we're trying to understand components of the trig function. So trig functions either are in this form, a sine bx plus d, or it might be a cosine, right? And they usually give us the values, okay? But here they're giving an example with variables instead of values, and they're telling us the meaning of each one of these variables and how you get them by looking at a drawn graph, for example. Instead of actually getting the function, you're going to do the opposite. They're going to give you the graph, and then you're going to figure out the function. Or you're going to look at the function, and then you're going to interpret what are things like the amplitude, the period, the principal axis. Okay? So I'm going to go through these about what each one means. So, for example, A is the amplitude. And amplitude means the height of the function from the bottom of the function to the top of the function divided by 2. Okay? So basically you could also think of it as the height of the function from the middle to the top, or from the middle to the bottom. Okay? So you can see in the equation that that's exactly what it does. It takes the maximum y value and the minimum y value, subtracts them to find the difference, and divides by 2. The period is how long it takes to go through one full cycle. So one full cycle would be to start at a certain position and end at a similar position one cycle later, right? And what is the width of this function? That would be the period. Okay, and the way you figure out the period is you take the value b, and then you take 360 degrees and divide by b. That gives you the width of the function. Okay, and then d is the middle height. Okay, so how high is the middle of the function? So when you look at a trig function, you can see the waves, and like you can kind of see where the middle of the wave is. That height is the d value. Okay, and the way you can find that is you either you find the middle, and if it's kind of hard to see the middle, then it might be easier to see the max and the min, and then what you do is you add the two together and divide by 2, which is finding the average between the max and the min. That makes sense, right? The average between the max and the min is the middle. Okay? All right. So now let's see if we can answer these questions knowing what we know about A, B, and D. For each function, predict the amplitude, the period, and the equation of the principal axis and the range. Okay, so it says amplitude. The amplitude would be this number here, right? Because it's A. So the amplitude is A, or the amplitude is 3. And do they want to know the period? The equation of the principal axis. So the principal axis is basically the d value, or this 1 here, and you just need to write y equals 1 because the principal axis is a horizontal line. And remember, horizontal lines are y equals something. Okay, so that's the principal axis. And then the next thing it asks is it asks for the period too. So the period, remember, is equal to 360 degrees divided by the b value, which in this case is 4, so it's equal to 90 degrees. And last of all, it wants the range, and the range is the range is the lowest y value and the highest y value. And the way you get that is you take the principal axis and you add 3, and you take the principal axis and you subtract 3. So the smallest value would be 1 minus 3, which would be negative 2. And the largest value would be 1 plus 3, which would be 4. So the range would be negative 2 less than or equal to y is less than or equal to 4. Okay, let's look at the next one. So this one's the easiest, right? 0.5 corresponds to A, which is the amplitude. So the amplitude is 0.5. the period is 360 divided by b, which is 0.5. So the period is equal to 360 degrees divided by 0.5. If you put that in the calculator, it would give you 720 degrees. 360 divided by 0.5 is 720. The equation of the principal axis is y equals -3. And the range is, we get the range from taking the principal axis and adding 0.5, and taking the principal axis and subtracting 0.5. It would be between those two, because -3 minus 0.5 is going to be the smallest possible value, and -3 plus 0.5 is going to be the largest possible value. So it would be -3 minus 0.5, which is equal to -3.5, and -3 plus 0.5, which would be equal to -2.5. So our range is going to be -3.5 less than or equal to y is less than or equal to -2.5. Okay, so that's the information about these two. I know that's a lot of information. I think that as we look through the next problems, it'll help you understand what are A, B, and D, what are amplitude, etc. Okay, let's look at the next ones. For the following graphs, determine the numerical values of the unspecified constants. So what we're looking for is, what are A in this case? And they give us B and they give us D. So let's confirm that D makes sense. So D is supposed to be the middle of the function, the height of the middle of the function. And if you look at the middle of the function, it does look like the height is 1. So 1 makes sense, right? If you look at the width of the function, it looks like one cycle is about, and it's kind of hard to see because they're not all marked, but let's see, 30, 60, 90, 120. So it looks like the width of one function is 120. Does that make sense? Because B is 3, right? So if we want to calculate the period from B equals 3, it would be 360 divided by 3, which is 120. Oh, that's true. So the period is indeed 120. That makes sense, okay? All right. Finally, let's figure out what the amplitude is. So normally the amplitude is given to us, but in this case, they're saying, look at this drawing and tell us what the amplitude is. Remember, amplitude is either the top to the bottom divided by 2, or the middle to the top. And then you don't have to divide by 2. It looks like the distance from the middle to the top is 2. So I would say that A equals 2. If we did it the other way, where we said, oh, let's go from the bottom to the top, it would be from -1 to 3. That would be a distance of 4. Divide that by 2, it's also 2. So the amplitude is 2, or the A value is 2. Okay, let's look at the next one. So in B, they're looking for 2 values, and then they give us the D value. Okay, so they want to know what A and B are, and they tell us that the D value is -2. Does it look like the height of the middle of the function is at -2? It does, right? Because it's -1, -2. So the middle of the function is at height -2. So we have confirmed that value. Let's look at A and B. So remember, A is the amplitude. So it's the middle of the function to the top of the function, or from the middle of the function to the bottom of the function. So you can see that that's 1 unit. So A is 1, right? The other thing you could do is you look at the bottom, which is -3, to the top, which is -1. That would be a distance of 2. You divide that by 2, and you also get 1, right? So A is equal to 1. What about B? B we find from the period, remember? So it's B is equal to, now what they gave us is the opposite, right? They gave us that the period is equal to 360 divided by B, okay? In this case, we want to know what B is. So we're going to put the period here. And so it looks like, let's see, one period is like that much. And oh, look at that. It actually, 2 periods, 2 cycles fit perfectly into 360. So one cycle must be 180. So it must be 180 equals 360 divided by B. if we do some algebra and cross multiplication on this, we'll get b is equal to 360 divided by 180, so b is equal to 2. Okay? All right. C. So here they're going to ask us for the value for A, the value for B, and the value for D. They're asking for us for all three. So what about the value of A? So if we look at the bottom of the function, it's at -4. The top of the function appears to be at 2. So it goes from -4 to 2. The distance from -4 to 2 is 6, right? And let's look at the formula for A, just to confirm that it works. The formula for A is max minus min divided by 2. So if we do that, we'll go max minus the min divided by 2. Do you see it's 2 plus 4, which is 6, divided by 2, which is 3? Okay? So the amplitude is equal to 3. A is equal to 3. Knowing the amplitude is 3, we can also see that the middle of the function is right there, right? So it's at -1. That makes sense, right? The halfway between -4 and 2 is -1. How do we do that with the formula? We use D equals min plus max divided by 2. So we have -4 plus 2 divided by 2. So it's -2 divided by 2 is -1. So D is equal to -1. What about B? B we figure out based on the width of the function. And we don't even have a full cycle here. If we look at this, it looks like half a cycle would be going from here to here. So it looks like basically it seems like a half a cycle basically goes from 0 to 360. So that means a full cycle would go from 0 to 720, right? So let's say that the period is 720. That means that it's 720 equals 360 divided by the B value. So the B value is equal to 360 divided by 720 if you do some algebra there. Basically, if you cross multiply, you'll end up with B equals 360 divided by 720, which is 0.5. So the B value is 0.5. Okay? So for that one, we had to find all three values. For 3A, for the following graphs, determine the numerical values of the unspecified constants. This time, they're giving us cosine. Okay? And the difference between sine and cosine is sine, as you can see, starts at the middle and goes up and then goes down and then comes up a little bit again. Cosine, it starts at the top, goes down, and goes up again. That's one cycle. Okay? So in this case, we can kind of see that the amplitude would be 2 and the, I forgot what you call it, the center line or the mean line. Let me see what they call it. They call it the principal axis. Okay, so the principal axis is at height -2. That seems to make sense because that's halfway in between the top and the bottom. And the height from the middle to the top is 2, and the height from the middle to the bottom is 2 also. So these two totally make sense. Let's find the period. So the period of cosine is like a smile. It goes from the top, it goes down, and it goes back up again. Looks like it goes from 0 to 180. Okay? So if the period is 180, then that means that that's equal to 360 divided by B, which is the formula, right? And if we do a cross multiplication, we'll have B equals 360 divided by 180. So B is equal to 2. Okay? And that's it for this page.